Hello friends, creators, fellow nerds, non-PC users. Welcome back to the channel. In our last video, we explored the productivity power couple, that is the Magic Trackpad and BetterTouchTool, or BTT. Picking up where we left off, let's continue with BetterTouchTool, but this time moving on to a little something that BTT refers to as custom floating menus and desktop widgets. Now, I've seen a couple BTT videos out there, but of the few that even exist, most of them seem to be focused on trackpad gestures and maybe some keyboard shortcuts.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
But I'm yet to see any showcasing what can be done with these so-called custom floating menus and desktop widgets. So I am here today to walk you through this super sweet way of customizing your Mac experience. Truly a magical blend of form and function that honestly nobody else is talking about.
Which is why we should talk about this.
Now, as you'll begin to see, the possibilities are endless. In a later video, I'm going to show you how you can tweak the apps you use. Yes, any app on your Mac. Basically, custom building menus and shortcuts and functionality that cater specifically to how you use your Mac apps. And it's amazing that you can do so without any coding. But in this video today, we're going to focus on your desktop, an often either cluttered nightmare of a space, or on the other hand, perhaps something you keep clean, but you never actually utilize as a valuable space. Now, if you've ever watched videos about a Mac's desktop, which I'm sure you have, you've probably only heard about using stacks to basically group files and folders, or you've probably seen videos about using widgets.
That's it. Frimble about with your widgets and doobobs.
And sure, widgets are great, and I use a few myself on my desktop, as you'll see, but I guarantee you, what you're about to watch in this video is something else entirely, that nobody else is talking about, that allows you to take complete control of your desktop and reimagine your desktop to become a sort of gateway drug to all the good stuff that's elsewhere on your computer. Basically your hard drives, documents, apps, photos, workflows, all that good stuff. Okay, are you excited about customizing your desktop experience in previously unimagined ways? Well, if not, you should be. Let's get into it. All right, welcome to my sexy desktop here. I'm going to walk you through step by step sort of how I got to this place of creating this ultimate desktop that is continually evolving, and it's only going to get better and better as I figure out new things, as I experiment with new things, specifically with BetterTouchTool. But before we get into BetterTouchTool, I want to show you sort of the last step I took right before I discovered BetterTouchTool. So as you can see, I created these nice little sleek little icon buttons up here, and these are folder shortcuts. And I'm not going to go into the full tutorial about that. If you'd like me to just sort of do an in-depth tutorial on creating folder shortcuts and customizing how they look, I'll just quickly say that what I would recommend is you can create, like if I create a folder here, right? It's got the generic folder. It's got this white text underneath it with the drop shadow, which to me looks hideous on any color background. If you put it on a black backdrop, to me that's fine. It's nice and clean. You don't notice any drop shadows. But as soon as you put any kind of color background, to me it just looks hideous, right? So you might be wondering, well, where this is untitled folder here, what happened to all the titles here? Well, I got rid of them by basically renaming this. And what you need to understand is you can't just leave it blank because it is a file, and every file or folder has to have some kind of name, even if it's just a space. And it has to have a unique, every file or folder has to have a unique name within a folder. So the desktop is basically a folder. If you go into your home folder here and you go under desktop, you see how everything here is what's showing up on your desktop, right? So you can't have two files named the same thing within a folder, obviously. So how did I get rid of all these? Well, I went through the painstaking trouble of I would name one of these folders like 1 space, another would be like 2 spaces, another would be like 3 spaces. So, you know, if I sat here and I named this space, like however many of these things I made up here, like, now obviously you wouldn't want to do this with the generic folder graphic because you're like, well, what the hell is this folder, right? So that's why you would want to create a custom graphic for what the folder would say, like what's in it, right? Yeah, but I'm not going to get into the specifics of how to make custom graphics for folders. If you're interested in that, leave a comment, let me know. I'll do a whole separate tutorial for that, because really what I want to hurry up and get into today is using BetterTouchTool to create a much better experience than what all this is here. So you don't have to worry about renaming things like 1 space, 2 space, because that solution is nice, but it pales in comparison to what I'm about to show you with BetterTouchTool. So you can bypass the ugly drop shadows on the text titles by doing what I did here, but there's still the downsides of this. One of the downsides is, let's say you want to click to launch this emoji folder, right? You can't click it just once to launch it. You have to double click it, which means every time you're clicking on anything, it kind of ruins this beautiful, elegant, like these circle designs and all the stuff I did, by putting this ugly gray box with this ugly outline around it. And it also, you notice how this little blue here, like that's basically highlighting what would have been the label here, right? So it's kind of exposing how you created this in the first place. Like, oh, okay, there's a bunch of blank spaces there. There's just 1 or 2 spaces here. So, you know, it's less than ideal. It's a little ugly. It's, you know, it's not great. So this is sort of the downside of this approach, which if you're using a Mac, just doing things the standard way, there's kind of no getting around this, right? So what would be ideal is if I could create some kind of button launcher menu system where, first of all, I would just click it once, because I just want to click it once to launch the emoji. I don't want to have to double click everything. You know, the longer you use your computer, you realize like clicking once is just, it sounds like a little thing, but it's just so much easier on your fingers, and it just speeds up time rather than double clicking. When you're browsing a website, right? When you're doing it any things within your app, you're not double clicking on everything. You're just clicking once to open a link, right? So why can't that be the case on your desktop? Well, Apple forces you on anything you want to open up on your desktop, you have to double click it.
Not necessarily.
Well, not so fast, because what I'm about to show you with BetterTouchTool is just an elegant, just the ultimate solution to this sort of thing. So this is where we're at. Now I'm going to get rid of this, what I've created here with these folder shortcuts. And instead, I'm going to walk you through what I've built with BetterTouchTool. So first I'm going to demo it, and then I'm going to show you how I put it together. All right, here we go. So now check this out. Instead of those individual folder shortcuts that I had before, which were built in a fairly standard way using Apple's, you know, folder shortcuts that you can put in your desktop, now I have built this brand new menu up here. I built this using BetterTouchTool. And what it is it's sort of the equivalent of what I just showed you. It's got the same links that jump me straight to these folders that I use all the time. But notice, I don't have these big folders. It's taking up less space, and I just went text only, and there's no drop shadows. And also notice how these buttons over here have a little bit of a rounded button, like a shaded feel, but then these are just text only. And I built this very specifically. I designed it this way because these are sort of my main folders. You know, I have basically my shared assets that I use across my various projects. I store all my video footage, you know, B-roll and whatever in this folder. Audio, all my audio files here, and all my visual assets are here. So within my visual folder, I have a bunch of like templates and all kinds of things within the visual folder. So all of these things here are actually individual folders within my visual folder. So this is kind of why I structured things and made things look the way they do this way, right? There are no subfolders that, at least that I've created so far within audio or video, that I wanted to sort of have an immediate jump to from my desktop, right? I can tweak this as much as I want. I can restructure things, but just to show you the logic behind how I built this, I'll just open up my visual folder. And by the way, as I launch this, notice I've got rollover states now, right? You can't do this with the way we had it before with any desktop shortcut folder that you normally have, right? I'll just bring one of these back. Let's bring this one back here, GIFs, right? So this was my GIF folder from before, shortcut. Notice when I roll over it, nothing happens. And you can't make that happen with the Mac default OS, right? Again, I mentioned the downsides before. If we just say click, you got to get this ugly box. You got to double click it to open it. You know, that's a pain. So now I've solved all that. With this, I can just roll over, nice little rollover state, a little subtle animation here. Again, I custom built all of this in BetterTouchTool. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. But it's just so nice and elegant. It's so nice and elegant compared to before, right? And it's a single click. Okay. I click it once, launches GIFs just like that. No double clicking involved, just a single click, right? So I have these sort of master folders here, the visual folder, and then within the visual folder, here I'll open the visual folder so you can see what I mean. You see how I have 3D, all my 3D assets here, actions and presets, brushes. But the thing is, like, I don't access brushes that often. You know, I don't access 3D assets that often. That's why I didn't create a shortcut up here to those. So I only created shortcuts here to the ones that I use the most often, right? So if I ever want to jump to the master folder, I can click here to do that. Or if I want to jump specifically to, you know, animated GIFs, do that here. Mockups, all my mockups are here, categorized. So this is the beauty of what I've created here, right? And similarly to before, we have the transparency. So basically, this is all black with these subtle shades here on whatever my background is, right? So this will work across any desktop wallpaper as long as I don't make my desktop wallpaper black, because then it would just be black on black and you wouldn't see anything there. So I'm gonna switch to a space over here to the right. And notice how it's still super slick, right? It's still these transparent menus over the red. And we'll switch over more space here to this green space here, right? And notice the same kind of beautiful, lovely effect. So you're basically building this transparent overlay over your Mac's desktop, which you just couldn't do this before. Like, there's no way you can do this sort of thing, you know, with Apple's built-in tools right now. And the beauty is, like, this is just how I've customized this to look and feel and work. If you don't want rollover states, you don't have to build yours that way. Or if you want your buttons bigger, you could design them to be bigger. Or maybe you want them vertically along your left side, not horizontally, the way I did mine. Or, you know, you can use whatever font you want to, right? Like, I use this standard font that I use for a lot of my graphics, especially on my desktop. The point is customization. You can make it your own. You can have it your way.
Have it your way.
Anyway, that's just the quick demo. Now I'm gonna walk you through how I built this baby. All right, so let's open up BetterTouchTool. And as you can see here, if you remember in my last video, I kind of walked you through the basics. I'm not going to do all that again. Maybe at some point I'll do an absolute beginner intro to BetterTouchTool that walks you through patiently, like, every aspect just of the interface and getting started. But if you haven't seen my previous video about how to use BetterTouchTool with the trackpad, I'll have a link in this description. Maybe I'll feature it up here in the corner here. So you should definitely check that video out to sort of as a starting point, especially if you have a trackpad. I show how I use BetterTouchTool with the trackpad. But today's video, we're focusing specifically on custom floating menus and desktop widgets. That's how they refer to it in BetterTouchTool. So if you look up here in this pull-down menu, these are all the different ways that you can customize your Mac experience. So you can add custom shortcuts and gestures and things to your trackpad. You can add keyboard shortcuts to do various things. You can have it type out specific key sequences. You can add things specifically for a Magic Mouse or a normal mouse. So there's just tons of different ways that you can customize and add shortcuts and everything. So, but for today, let's focus on these custom floating menus and desktop widgets. And specifically, I'm going to walk you through how I built this bad boy up here. Here we go. So you would basically need to click the plus to create a new one. And that's how you would get this here floating menu. Then you double click it to go in to your specific list of menu items here, right? So the first thing when you've created a menu item, you want to give it a name, right? Just so you can easily remember and recognize it when you're working with it. So I just named it assets-shared, right? Let's design it and make it look how we want to make it look. So first you would type in what the text is that you want in this menu, right? So if I wanted to change it to something like files, okay. If I just tap over here or click save, notice how it already updated up here. So that's it. That's how you change the text and click save, right? So now it's back to how I had it. So it's a little wonky, but I'm just walking you through here. How you stylize things, you have to be very specific in terms of, like, you can't just say, change the font size here and it'll, see, watch what happens if I change it to 30. Nothing changed, right? So what you have to do actually, which is interesting in a way because you could actually stylize different elements of the text. So mine, I made them all 11 point, but let's say I just wanted the word assets to be bigger, right? Then you could select assets over here, then go here and do 30. So it's a little clunky this way because you don't just change the font stuff here and it automatically applies, but you have to select the specific text within here, which is a blessing and a curse. So it's a little trickier. I'm just making you known to that. But the beauty of it is you can like literally custom design every letter. You could have these things be different colors, different, within one button. So it's a little awkward, but once you understand it, it's like, oh wow, this is actually really powerful, right? So if I want that, let's just hit save. And now look, my menu up here. Obviously it kind of breaks the other settings I've set for the button, like now it's too tall, the whole button. But I'm just letting you know, whatever changes you make here will instantly apply here as soon as you hit save. So we don't want that. So I was doing 11 point. So I'm gonna re-highlight this, go back to, well, let's do 10, and I'm gonna hit the up arrow, or just type 11, hit enter, okay. Now I'll hit save. There we go. Now our button's back to normal. Okay, so we have our text. It's the same thing. If you select the whole text, click fonts, and it's gonna bring up all your fonts. And you can literally custom design this to look however you want. You can also like literally add an emoji in too, right? So let's say we want this smiley face here, you add it in. Let's close out the emoji here, hit save, and there you go. So you've got emoji up here, and like you could literally have just an emoji button, and if you click it, you could assign it an action to add that specific emoji to your clipboard, right? I'm just giving you ideas that these don't just necessarily have to be links to folders, but these could be your favorite emoji that you use all the time. These could be Apple shortcuts. These could be copying things to your clipboard that you use all the time. The possibilities are endless. I'm just letting you know. I could go on and on and on about how amazing this tool is, BetterTouchTool as a whole, but I'm trying to sort of contain my glee and keep things simple and on point here. Let's stay on target.
Stay on target.
As I walk you through just building this menu here. So, okay. So you understand now, you can obviously change the color. That's how you would do it. You have to make sure you select the whole text, remember, because if you just choose this word, it would only change the color of the word. So you select this whole thing. You can change your font, you can change the color, change the size, right? So done, good to go. So let's move on here to the background. And you notice how I have some transparency here, and I also have a rollover state. So what I did was, for the background, you can have it be transparent, no background, which is what I did, I think, for the other ones. So if you click on, let's say, EPS, this other button, right? You go here to background. You see how I left it on clear background. But let's go back to assets shared here. For this one, I wanted it to be a color. If you click here, it'll bring up this little color module thing here, and it'll show you what I did was I picked black, but I set the opacity to 10%. That's how you get this little subtle shade here, right? So if I were to up this to 82%, let's say, and then I click save, you see how this button got really dark? So I don't want that. I want to go back to 10%. Click save. Now I'm back how I have it, right? So for these, I think what I did was I wanted to increase the opacity of the shade area, and I wanted to add this stroke when I rolled over it, right? So for that, you go here to the hover background color. Notice how it updated here to 20%. So that's what I did. The background color is a 10% opacity black. The hover background color is a 20% opacity black. That's how you get this effect, right? And then you could add a shadow, but you know I hate drop shadows.
Just hate them so much.
So you go to border though. And what I did was you can set the border to be a really thick border. I set a 1 pixel border, and the initial border color is 0 opacity. You see over here. Here, I'm just gonna move this little colors thing over here so it's close by. But then the hover border color, I made full black. Okay, so see here, 100% black. So we go from it being invisible at 0% opacity to 100% black. That's how you get this rollover state of the border. It's always there at 0% opacity and then 100% opacity border. So that's pretty much it. That's basically how you stylize this thing. And also notice how it has that little fade on. So it animates on, right? If you don't want that effect, go back over here to background and see this little checkbox here for animate hover. If you uncheck that, see how when I roll over it, it just immediately pops on, doesn't fade on, no animation. Now you can do that, but notice how I haven't changed it for any of these other buttons. They're still fading on, but I like this nice subtle animation effect where it's just kind of slightly moving, especially when you're rolling over a bunch. It leaves that little trail. Pretty nice, pretty nice. So I'm gonna put it back on because I like the animated hover, and just like that, it's right back to how we had it. That's basically how you design one of these buttons and create the hover state and a border, right? We won't get into the positioning here and the sizing. The item size, I just left it to fit content. But if you wanted this to be a certain width, like for some reason, let's say, see how it got really big. Let's say you want the minimum width to be at least 300 pixels, right? Hit save, there you see. So now, no matter what, this button, it's not going to fit the content. So it's not going to fit surrounding that button text. It will always be at least 300 pixels. I notice how it brings this little error here is the minimum width is 300, but the maximum width is 200. Obviously the max can't be less than the min. So let's just say 500. Hit save. Notice I got rid of that error. So now the max width is 500. The minimum width is 300, right? Let's reduce that to 250. Yeah, but it's actually going to display based on the maximum width. So if we reduce that here to 400, hit save, see how it got smaller. So that's how, this is a great thing to know if, let's say you want all of the buttons to be the exact same width, right? Then you would just set the maximum width to be 400 or 300. So all of your buttons would be the exact same width across. So that might come in handy if you want sort of a vertical menu. So you wouldn't want to have like a short button, a long one, a short, long. You just want a standard size. Then I would set, go with this option to make them all the same width of buttons. You know what I mean? That would make sense. But for our case, how I set things up, fit content will work beautifully. There you go. Let's go back here. Our menu is selected, our floating menu is selected. So now we're dealing with the overall settings of the whole menu, not an individual item within the menu. Okay, you with me? And actually, here's what I'm gonna do, because I have mine set perfectly, so I don't wanna have to ruin it and kind of come back to it later. So what I'm going to do is you can right click, copy this menu, then paste. Okay. So now we literally have 2 of these menus on top of each other, right? And they have the exact same names. I'm going to disable my original one. And then this new one, I'm going to rename it just for demo purposes. I want to type in demo because that's what we're doing today. Hit save. So now I have this identical menu, and I have my one that I use as my real one is saved. And now we're just playing around with this demo one, right? This is great because you can always create like versions and, experiment and, like maybe you like this one sometimes and go back to this other one. You can always keep multiple versions. All right, so we've covered the individual menu sort of settings and aesthetics of that. Now let's take a look at the overall menu itself, the parameters for that. So again, you click here, you go into your individual menu items within the menu, click the back button here to adjust the general settings for the menu as a whole. So over here on this right area, we have these tabs. So we're focusing on the general settings here. All right, so let's just focus on the key things here. There's a ton of things you can customize, but let's just focus on the most important, the crucial things here. So let's go to position on screen here. What I want to do is you can make menus so that you can have like a little overlay that just floats and you can move it or click and move it around wherever. But this one I specifically wanted locked sort of at the top left. So under position on screen, I don't want this to sort of be a thing that I move around all the time. I just want it to be locked over there at the left. So that's why I chose specific position on screen, within window, mouse location, etc. So those are your 2 options. If you want to move it around freely, you would choose that. If you want to keep it locked in a specific position, you choose this. So for me, as I want it up here, starting in the top left corner, and I want it to go full width across. Now, obviously, textures is my last thing in the item, but this strip actually goes all the way across. In fact, just to show you the positioning, I'm going to go here to design light. The background. Now I set it to be a clear background, but just so you can see the whole menu. Let's say color. Now you see this, like, it also has a rollover state here. So that's hideous, of course, but let's just make this. I didn't really walk you through exactly how to start this before. So let's go to RGB. Let's say black. And so this is our default state. So let's make the whole thing like, let's say 25% black. And let's make the hover be, instead of this ugly, let's do 5% black. Let's hit save. Okay. So again, this is just for demo purposes, so you see what I mean. So you see now, this is not for individual menu items, but this is for the entire menu as a whole. So now it's very clear to see how much space this thing is taking up and where it's positioned, the menu. So the menu itself is full width and it's locked at the top left. So let's go back to the general here. Position on screen. Remember, I wanted a specific position, top left. So at the specific screen's top left corner, at the specific screen is what you want to pick, right? I mean, technically we're in the focus screen, but what if I'm focusing on one of my different monitors? I don't want the menu to shift over there. So I want this to be on my main central studio display, not one of my side monitors, right? So we want it to be specific screens, top left corner. You can choose any of the edges or corners, whatever you want, but I wanted mine at the top left. So this is where you choose, see, I have 3 monitors plugged in. So I want this to be my main monitor, the studio display, right? So then you can offset the position or the y-axis by a certain amount of pixels, right? Like mine is -24 here for the y, but let's say I change that to 54, hit save. Now it shifted the whole thing down. So notice how if I do 0, it is actually not factoring in my, menu bar up here at the top. So in order to accommodate for that, shift it down a little bit. That's why I set this to -24. Hit save. See, now it's like kind of perfectly there. So again, a lot of this, the way you're positioning things, like you're going to have to do some trial and error to get it exactly positioned how you want. But in this example, it's pretty straightforward. The X, I want it all the way over to the left edge, so I left that to 0. So that's it for the positioning. Let's go to menu size, and here's where you define the minimum width, fit content, define width and height based on a variable. Things can get very complex very quickly in this app, but it's because you have so much freedom and creative control over every little nook and cranny and little pixel here and there. So most of you probably are only going to want to go between these two. So I set up to define my minimum width. So remember when I increased the size of the assets shared button and it got cropped off? That was because I set the minimum height for this menu to be 50, but that height was bigger. So if I want this whole menu to get bigger vertically to accommodate for larger buttons, I would change this right here. You see? So now I just changed the size of the whole menu, right? But obviously this is kind of starting to break things. So let's go back to 50. Okay, so we've got this resize on hover option here. And I'm not going to get all into this now because that's not how I set up this menu or not. But basically, you could have a menu when you hover over it, like it could be like a little square or circle, a little button here on the side. And as soon as you hover over it, it could resize the whole menu. So all of a sudden it could be going from a tiny little circle to you roll over it, and then it might expand this whole large menu, to go full width or height. So that in itself, there's a lot of options. I might do a separate demo for that another day after I create one of those. But right now I'm just trying to show you how I built this specific one. So I'm not going to get into anything here. So let's go to spacing. This is cool. So you notice how it just kind of these buttons have a nice amount of space. That doesn't just happen necessarily automatically. In fact, you could change it if you want. And that's the spacing between menu items. So vertical spacing doesn't really matter here for us because ours is a horizontal menu here basically. But let's say I change this to 25. Notice, just like that, we have this gap of 25 pixels in between each button, right? So again, with just one little tweak of a setting, you can customize exactly how the whole menu works. You don't have to manually adjust like padding between buttons, like, oh, this button. I mean, you could, like I've actually created a little space in here. So you can create little individual spaces and stuff. So, but if you want sort of a global overall setting, like 5 pixels looked good to me. So that's like just the right amount of space in between the buttons. All right, so let's go over here to other and Z-index. Now, the important thing about this is here, the window level. So think about it. Like I haven't showed you what happens when I have any apps open, but if you have an app open, do you want this floating menu to be on top of your app? Which you might want to have that. You might want to have some menus. In fact, you can have multiple menus, right? I'm just showing you one, but you can have multiple menus. Maybe you want some of them to always be floating on top, So let me give you an example here of, actually, I'll just quickly drag this over. So this is basically an application. So notice the window level that I set for this menu is the same as desktop icons. So basically treat it as if it's something on your desktop, meaning any app that you open up, like if I open up Freeform, see, it's going to be above your desktop. So it's above that menu, right? So coming back here, but what if I want, let's see. So standard float on top will be above any of the apps. So like now notice when I bring up Freeform, see, this menu is on top of my app. Now, in this case, the way I've built it, it doesn't really make sense. You wouldn't really want to do that. But if you, let's say you want to have a little mobile menu that you can move around wherever, or maybe you want a specific menu built specifically for Freeform and you want that menu to always be available in the top or the bottom left, right? In that case, you might want to have the standard float on top. So, and then there's also, when you hover a menu, you can change that window level as well. So, maybe it starts as the standard as desktop icons, but then as soon as you roll over it, it becomes on top of everything else. So, it just gives you all these options. You're probably not going to need to mess around with these too much. I'm thinking you probably either want to go with, and by the way, this maximum float on top, even over the menu bar, that's pretty self-explanatory, but that's literally like, look at that, see? It'll move on top of the menu bar, but standard float on top is probably what we want. See, if I click and move it, see now it won't go above the menu bar on top, so it kind of locks it into the space below. So let's stick with the same as desktop icons because we want any app to show up above it like that, right? So just letting you know that these options are here. For this kind of menu, you're gonna wanna have it be same as desktop icons. So there's other things like conditional visibility. You can get so granular here. I might do an advanced tutorial in a later time, but that's basically it. Like that's all you really needed to know to set up this sort of thing. So let's really quick go back to design light and let's go back to our clear background. And that's it. We're back to how we originally had it. Okay. So I've showed you how to adjust the aesthetics and feel for an individual button. And again, like you can have this be a red button and an orange button and a blue button, like every button, you can use different fonts for each button, the possibilities are endless and you can customize it exactly how you want. Like just the way I set these sort of top level folders to be this little shaded button, but then the ones within the visual folder are these clear buttons. You can do that, it's up to you. That's pretty much it for this. The one last thing I want to show you here that I didn't really walk you through is assigning actions to the buttons, like what happens when you click a button. So really quick. So this is our main menu here. We double click, we go in. These are individual items. Oh, by the way, here's that spacer that I said. It's a menu item. Nothing happens when I click it or roll over it because I just set all these things to basically be transparent. Like, there's no text in it, there's nothing there, but that's one way you could just create a little spacer. I probably could have gone into this individual button and added like some padding to the side of it. So there's multiple ways of doing things, but that's just how I created this little spacer. Oh yeah, so what I wanted to show you was, let's say my video folder, right? What happens when I click this video folder? So when I click it, it launches my footage on my Maverick drive.
I am dangerous.
Where I keep all of my B-roll and, templates, anything related to video footage and stuff like that. I keep in that folder on that external hard drive attached. So that's what that does. And really simply, just to launch that, all you have to do is, you click this plus, and then you assign what action that you want to have happen. And for me, let me just delete this. I chose this one right here. Launch application, open file, start AppleScript. So you select that one, and then all you have to do is choose which folder. You click there, and it'll bring up the dialog box of what folder on your computer you want to jump to. That's pretty much it. Again, this isn't a full tutorial of all that BetterTouchTool can do, but I just set these up to jump to specific folders, but you could jump them to a specific file if you wanted. If you've got like a Photoshop template that you use all the time for your YouTube thumbnails or whatever, you can make a shortcut to that file and you just tap it once and it would just launch that Photoshop file, Or you can actually, just to show you a little bit, like you can actually launch an Apple shortcut from clicking this little button. So again, the possibilities are endless. All right, so that's it for sort of the standard way of creating these floating menus, especially if you want to create a locked menu on your desktop. Okay, so again, in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can create specific menus to add functionality to specific apps. I'll demo some of that, like how I built with like Photoshop and whatnot. So, but one thing I want to delve into here to sort of take things to an even more advanced level, which isn't really super more advanced, it's just super more customized, right? Because this might work pretty easily for just sort of creating a standard horizontal menu like this. But what if you have a more complex layout? I want to show you how you can do that sort of thing. And let's say you want to have a lot of graphics in it as well that you want to custom build like in Photoshop or something like that, right? So that's what I'm going to show you next, which is sort of a replacement for desktop widgets, for standard desktop widgets. And I think even the way I've built mine is a little bit unique and unusual compared to what you would see anybody else, how they would do it. But because I'm the super neat freak perfectionist, well, you'll see how I built mine. Let's get into that next. What I'm going to demo for you now is what I've done on my Dell monitor that's to the right of my main Apple Studio display. A replacement of sorts for widgets. And we're going to focus on the Apple Notes widgets here. All the time I'm sitting here at my desk, I need a quick way of just jumping to my ideas. Now, this could be an idea for a YouTube video that I'm making. It could be an idea for a t-shirt design, tweet idea. In general, like that's what all of these little notes shortcuts are over here, are like quick capture, just quick links to frequently accessed notes. Like really, I just need to know the name of the note. But because they include all of this extra metadata here with the date and the time and the first line displayed, like it ends up just cluttering the look. So when I just quickly glance over, I really have to scan it, reading through all this extra text on screen that's really not necessary, right? I'd prefer to just have a nice, clear, big button that I can see from a distance. Remember, I got 3 monitors here, so I got a lot of screen real estate I'm looking at. So if I just glance over, I just quickly want to look and see like, oh, stand-up ideas or t-shirt ideas for this brand, and move the mouse over and just click it really quick, right? So here's what I ended up doing, because you can't custom design these Apple Notes widgets. You're just stuck with how they look. So what I did was, I opened up Photoshop and I designed a vertical wallpaper to fill up this entire vertically oriented Dell monitor. So then it's basically just your wallpaper graphic. And then what I did was I used BetterTouchTool to place invisible buttons over the areas of the desktop wallpaper graphic that I wanted to click on for it to take me somewhere. Now, if that sounds confusing, let me actually show you what it looks like and then it'll make complete sense. Basically, I did away with all these Apple Notes widgets. And by the way, I'm going to clear them out of the way here, but it's a little annoying because there's no way with widgets, but you can't select a bunch of widgets and move them together. At least with desktop folders, you can kind of move a group like that. But unfortunately, with any widgets, you can't just mass select a bunch of them. You just have to click and move each individual one. So I'll just move them down here for the time being, because I'm going to show you in a second what I've ended up doing. Okay, so my Apple Notes are out of the way, and my wallpaper is completely black here. Now what I'm going to do is right-click, change the wallpaper. So just like that, this is a wallpaper graphic with these folders I made and all this stuff. Now, BTT hasn't even touched this at all yet. This is literally just a wallpaper graphic, like you would put a photo of a sunset or anything like that. So I designed this in Photoshop, and as you can see, there's like a hierarchy to it, like things are grouped together. So it's and the type is big where I need it to be big. Now comparing with the Apple Notes that I had before, remember, like this is just all yellow, it's all small print, and I'm like, okay, there's no hierarchy, it's not easy to quickly glance over and determine what's a folder versus what's an individual note, right? You can't quickly glance and determine that. But now it's like very clear, right? Obviously this is a folder. These are all folders up here. These are all folders over here. And the way I did it was these little lists here, like obviously there's a t-shirt on this folder. This is a Apple Notes folder of all my t-shirt ideas. And these are specific brands of mine. So if I come up with an introversion t-shirt design or a Popkatsu pop culture t-shirt design, this is the specific note that's located within this notes folder. This is how I've designed my ideal notes widget setup to look like. And I can always change this by just opening this up in Photoshop and changing the colors or the layout or whatever. So now let's bring in BTT, because without BTT, this is pretty much useless. It's just a wallpaper graphic. So enter BTT. It's a floating menu, Apple Notes on right Dell. So what I'm going to do is, just like we did before, I'm going to copy this and duplicate it. I'm going to paste it. So now I have a duplicate copy. I'm going to rename this one, go over here to general, and just write demo. So this is just for the purpose of this video while I'm showing you how I set this up. So I'm going to right click, we're going to enable it. So now when I click on quotes, it just opened up my quotes folder and it defaulted to pop culture quotes. But that's it, it works. So let's say I want to jump to my t-shirt ideas. Click that, it opens up my t-shirt ideas. You don't see anything here, but this is because I laid out invisible buttons. And just so you know, like here, let's go to the general settings, the design. Let's do, instead of a clear background, let's do a color. And it's very subtle right now, but let's make it a little more subtle or a little bit more apparent. So let's make the background color opacity like 70%. Hit save. Okay. So now I just set this color for the menu. Instead of it being clear, now it's this transparent orange color. And again, obviously that looks hideous, but I'm only doing this to explain to you, this is the invisible widget or the invisible floating menu that I created. So basically when you're setting up this, it basically just creates a blank canvas. So then you've got to add the menus within the canvas. So again, by double clicking that, it brings up all the menu items that I've created here. Now, obviously this is a lot, but what I want to show you is, remember how I was automatically creating them in a row, one after the other, and it would have the spacing and all that stuff. While I started to do that, let's say these folders here, right? So the Caslo folder is the first one here. So like this menu item here. So this launches, if I click it now, it launches my Caslo overall folder, which defaults to the first note that happens to be in the folder right now, which is a list of my tweets, my tweet ideas. Let's say when I'm doing drawings, here, this is actually the second note. Down here, this is a specific link to my drawing ideas for little cartoons and stuff, right? So if I click that, text for drawings jumps right to it here, right? So as you can see, it works. It's just, you don't see the individual buttons. But what I want to kind of show you is, just to make it clear, let's go back and get rid of this ugly, back to the floating menu here. Under the design, background, we're going to go back to clear. Okay, so now you don't see anything. So now let's go into the individual items. So this Caslo folder, let's change this. Again, the design, I actually set it as a color, but I set the opacity to 0. So the color doesn't matter. Let's say just any kind of reddish orange over here. And I'm just going to increase the opacity up to like, let's say, so you can see what I'm doing. I'm just going to increase the opacity to like 60%, right? So you just got to hit save. Voila. There you go. What I did was I did a whole row of buttons all the way across, like all these invisible buttons. All I had to do was create the width and height of this one individual button. And then I just would duplicate it, like all the way across. And I set whatever I wanted, the spacing in between. And it pretty much just created these buttons all the way across. So this process really didn't take that long. And just like before, under every individual button, you have to assign it an action. So I clicked here and I said, open URL. Because with Apple Notes, you can actually get a URL for a folder or an individual note. And once you get that, you just copy and paste it in here. And that's it. So it can take you off to a URL of a website, or it can take you to the URL of a note. And if you open up a URL of an Apple Note, even though it's an iCloud link, it won't actually take you to a web browser and open up an Apple Note there. Luckily, it's smart enough to open up the Apple Notes app, the native app, directly on your Mac. Just a little FYI. I'm not going to get into explaining all that because I might do a separate video about that just to show you what you can do with Apple Notes. The point is, what I wanted to illustrate to you today is this is an alternative way of designing using BetterTouchTool in the sense of you might want to get really playful. I mean, this would take a lot longer if I tried to do this within BetterTouchTool, because it can be kind of clunky, kind of awkward. Obviously, this is not Photoshop. This is not a design tool. This is a building app that helps you build menus and functionality and whatnot, right? So my whole thing is like, use it for what it's good for. Photoshop, I can design very quickly and very, smoothly there. Design my whole wallpaper exactly how I want things to lay out. And then it's just a matter of creating these little invisible buttons and putting them all over the place here, right? So just one final thing here before we wrap things up is obviously these row of buttons here worked fine, but things get a little bit more complicated because it's hard to do like a row, and then row. And then you would have to stop and then create a whole nother widget over here. So what I did was I figured out that you can actually custom position each individual item. Every little menu can have its own custom position. So even though they're all within this overall canvas of this, overall menu space, you can position them in terms of coordinates anywhere on your del. And I'm going to show you an example of that. So let's just say this music folder here, right? That opens up all of my folder of music ideas. So that, as I'm scrolling down, again, make sure you label all these things. You want to label all your items because especially if you're going to create a complex system like this, you want to be able to keep track. So the music folder is at the bottom of my list. It was the last folder that I added. First, I'm going to tweak the design so you can see the actual button. So there's our music button, our invisible music button with no rollover state. Okay, so you're wondering, how did I position it to be exactly there? Well, we're at this menu item. And instead of the design, you want to go to the general tab here. So let's try to open this up a little bit. Let's just compare it with one of these. So if you notice here under general, let's go back to this casual folder here. Under general, under item position, see how it's set to auto position based on chosen menu layout. So we've already specified for it to just lay out all the buttons horizontally one after the other. So that worked for those. But what we want to do now is an absolute positioning of these other buttons that are a little bit different because of our unique layout of things. Okay, so going back to the music folder here at the bottom. So we're under the general tab here, under item position. Notice I did not select auto position based on chosen menu layout. This time instead I chose absolute position. And this is the real key here. So after you choose that, then you basically just specify from the top left the X and Y coordinates, okay? And it's kind of weird, but it counts down like negative values, the Y value. So if this is, I guess it makes sense because if this is 0, 0, anything to the right of here is going to be a positive X value. Anything below here is going to be a negative Y value, right? So it kind of makes sense. So obviously it'll take a little trial and error, but I just kind of want to show you. So I found out, again, the area doesn't have to be exact as long as it's close enough. Because remember, I'm going to make these invisible. It just needs to be generally as I click anywhere around here, right? I determined that the X value needed to be 970 and the Y value needed to be minus 688. Okay. So notice what happens if I change this 970 to 1270 and I hit save. See, now the X went too far over here, right? So again, when you're positioning things, your invisible nav, your invisible menu items over your desktop graphics or however you want to do this, it's going to take a little trial and error, you know? So you might say, oh, you didn't know, and then you're like, go to 1070, hit save, and you're like, okay, close enough. Let's change it to 970. And then perfect, there you go. So that's it. So I did that for each one of these individual buttons. Same thing for the stand-up, same for the general ideas. And that's it. You know, I'm not going to go to the lengths of showing all of these buttons, but basically, just like this one and these, I have these invisible buttons placed over all of these items that basically just correspond with the desktop wallpaper graphic that I made in Photoshop, which is underneath it all. There you go. This is just the best of both worlds, right? I'm using Photoshop to design my dream interface for my desktop wallpaper. And then I just lay the buttons on top of it with BetterTouchTool and, add these little triggers and actions. What do you want to have happen when you click on these various buttons? So like I said, for me, my expectation was I just want to jump in this whole area here to Apple Notes, right? So obviously I no longer need these widgets over here. I mean, if you just look and compare, I'm going to move this out of the way. But just looking, from a distance here, what you can see, this is so much more clear to me to just quickly glance and go straight to the notes that I want versus how I had to resort to Apple Notes before. I have to squint and look and it's like, yeah, that's the one I want. No, it's just way less clear. And this is the kind of thing where you're just doing it all through the day. You're saving valuable seconds and minutes by like not scanning to look for, what was that idea or the note that I wanted to find? It's just so clear, it's like, and the other thing is like, I don't have to worry about, these things moving or, like getting in the way. Sometimes actually when I reboot, I've had problems with various widgets. Like sometimes, even though I would spend all this time to arrange all these desktop widgets, there's a bug in macOS sometimes where all your widgets just disappear. When that happens, it's like, oh my God, you got to recreate all of these again. Again, another pain that's done away with by doing it this way, And the cool thing is, if I ever want to change this, all I have to do is just disable those invisible buttons, and then that's it. Voila. So there you have it. It's a way of creating what you could call custom widgets, where really it can do a lot of things that you might have to download or buy a third-party widget, but you're locked into exactly how the developer has built the widget, right? So you might not like their font choice, the typography, you might not like the colors, the layout, or you're stuck with it, right? But this way, you can open up Photoshop or Canva or whatever design app you use, design your interface that you want to have embedded into your desktop, design it exactly the way you want, then go into BetterTouchTool, create all these invisible buttons over it, and just position them where they need to be. And then you just assign the action. And like I said, I only built mine to jump straight to specific Apple Notes and folders within Apple Notes, but you could literally have this be the 5 websites that you always use. These could literally be Apple shortcuts that run, like maybe there's a series of things that you want to have happen, like a wake up sequence or change the lighting in your apartment or whatever. Like you can program all of that into Apple shortcuts. You could trigger the Apple shortcuts from any of these buttons. Again, this is the beauty of BetterTouchTool. The possibilities are endless. It's up to you. BetterTouchTool is basically just this framework, this super powerful tool that once you understand it and generally how it works, which I've shown you in the last video and now this one, you should be able to just take it and run with it and use it to just revolutionize your desktop and just reimagine your desktop. It's no longer something that just sits there, but it's actually dynamic now, right? You're bringing it to life. And no matter what you're working on, you've always had access to your desktop. You can just have all this stuff that's filling up all your screen, browser windows, all kinds of stuff, right? Spotify. You always have access to your desktop though. Like I programmed my mouse, the bottom left button on the side, it just reveals the desktop. So that's it. My hand is always on the mouse. So it's like, I always have continual access to my desktop, whether it's on this monitor or my main monitor or my left Dell. I have all the screen real estate and I have complete access to it with a click of my mouse, And from here, I can jump to all my Apple Notes. Again, this is just the beginning for me. Like I've started with Apple Notes and those shortcuts to all my asset files, right? All my graphics and patterns and gradients and audio, sound effects, all that kind of stuff. As you can see now, I can start to do away with all these Apple Notes. So there you go. So there's more of like the final product today. Form and function. It's well designed, it's very clear and completely functional. Just these magic shortcuts, that again are available at any moment's notice. Just a click of a mouse, you're right to your desktop. So hopefully you got a lot of value out of this video. Honestly, I hope this has blown your mind. Like if you've seen anybody else doing a tutorial like this on YouTube, on the internets, wherever, go ahead and try to send it my way. But honestly, I've been looking. I'm yet to see anybody do a demo like this, where I'm not just showing you BetterTouchTool, like here, click this, do that, click here, do this, but I'm also giving you ideas. I'd love for you to take this and run with it. If you do use BetterTouchTool, and by the way, I do have my link in the description to give Setapp a trial run. So if you give Setapp a try, use the link in this description, you can get access to BetterTouchTool, but also a bazillion other apps. Just try it out. Try it out for a week, put it to the test, see how comfortable you are with BetterTouchTool. Take a look at all the other apps that are available. I think you're gonna love it, because to me, this has been a total game changer, BetterTouchTool alone, but then there's all these other great apps too. So for me, if you're not using Setapp and you're a Mac user, I'm like, you're really missing out. So yeah, check the link in the description. I'll also include a link as a pinned comment to this video. So if you decide to go ahead and sign up on Setapp and start using BetterTouchTool and you're experimenting with it, hit me up on Twitter. I'm Jake Haslow on Twitter, or reach out to me, post a comment on this video. Just show me, same thing on Instagram, Jake Haslow. Just show me what you've done, because I'd really just love to see. I've shown you my setup and how I've been using it, and this is just me scratching the surface, just getting started. I'm going to keep pushing this. I'm going to keep going further and further, and like, how much more can I do with this thing? So I'll keep you all posted as I learn more things with this app, and as I customize things more, as I discover along the way, just like what more can be done with this. Yeah. So subscribe to the channel to stay tuned to find out even more of what can be done with BetterTouchTool. In the next video that I promised about BetterTouchTool, I told you I'm going to show how you can build in custom menus within specific apps to do things, to do various tasks, actions that are specific to that app. And you can create as many of these as you want, like create one set of extra buttons and navigation and tools and stuff for Photoshop, create another one for your web browser, Adobe Premiere, Safari, whatever you're doing. So that'll be the next BetterTouchTool video that I do, but that's it for today. I really hope to have just inspired and educated you as to what can be done with BetterTouchTool, with these custom floating menus and desktop widgets, and specifically with reimagining your desktop. So that would warm my heart if y'all take this and run with it and show me what you've made. Show me your desktops. Show me your desktops. Like, I'd love to see what you've done, having watched this video now and getting an understanding of all these things, right? With that, I will say adieu for today. Don't forget to click like if you've learned something new today. Click subscribe to get access to the upcoming videos, both about BetterTouchTool and other apps within Setapp, plus Adobe Premiere stuff, Photoshop stuff. The new iPhones are out now, or they're pre-releasing, whatever, after the Apple event yesterday. So I'm probably going to create some iOS content, some iPhone content, especially with Apple Intelligence around the corner. So there's just so much content to be made. There's so much that I'm going to be making and sharing with you guys. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and that's it for today. Hope you learned a lot, and look forward to hearing from you with whatever you're using BetterTouchTool to do on your Mac. All right, I'll see you in the next video.
What to watch next?